Our story begins with the fact that we are shown a nephew and uncle who tells the boy that there are still many places in the world where no man has gone before. The boy decided to listen to his advice, and from that moment, his dream became to travel around the world. But one fine day, his journey took him to the wrong place, and we are shown a girl who discovered a stranger on her territory. It turns out that he ended up on some kind of magical island, on which there were many girls who were surprised to see the traveler here. After which we are shown this very island called Yazland. Only girls lived on it. The next chapter welcomes us with a small question. Do you have a dream in life that you would like to achieve? A kind of bucket list. For this boy, the biggest dream was to go on a trip on his own ship, and the moment had come to make it all happen. This is what the main character thought until something terrible happened. His ship was wrecked in a terrible storm. After which we see the boy in far from the best condition, and someone is trying to wake him up. The boy finds himself trapped, but he still doesn't feel well because he could throw up at any moment. Some woman's voice says that Kunung Aowal finally woke up, but what the main character saw in front of him shocked him. A whole crowd of girls stood in front of him saying that a foreigner was on their territory. That's how he ended up on this island, but the boy still didn't understand what the hell was going on here. He still remembers that his ship was wrecked at sea, and apparently the sea washed him onto this island, but he just couldn't understand what these ladies were talking about. They also had a strange appearance, and he just thought that they had such a way on this island, like primitive people. But the boy understood that he was not welcome on this island, and he felt how hostile everyone in the area was against him. Realizing the situation he found himself in, the boy simply begins to bang his head on the floor because now he doesn't know what to do. Suddenly, he somehow heard what the girls were saying in a whisper. They were saying to leave the boy alive for now and not send him to the next world. But a dispute arose between them because some wanted to keep him alive and others wanted to get rid of the stranger. All this was done for the good of the island, but still they were going to break some rules. Suddenly, the main character is shocked because for some reason, he learned to understand their language even though they clearly did not speak Korean. After which the actions are transferred to his memories when he came to his uncle, which greatly surprised him. As a child, he was very sweet and asked his uncle to tell him that story again if the child was not tired of it, but for him it was very funny. It was a story about a world traveler that the guy kept asking me to tell, even though everyone called his uncle a braggart. But the main character still thought that he was an incredibly cool dude. Among all the stories, he had his favorite one. It was about a mysterious island that was cut off from the rest of the world, thereby forming a completely different ecosystem. No matter how sad it was, no one can live forever. Soon his uncle died due to a terrible illness. But before his death, he decided to make a cool gift for his nephew, who loved listening to his exciting stories. There were only two things in the box: an old traveler's cap that was with him on every voyage, as well as his personal navigator's diary with all the notes about his travels at sea. This diary described all his adventures and various situations in which he found himself, as well as strange creatures and objects. The main character constantly reread it several times a day and was able to remember it completely. And yet his uncle left him just a great gift, because now he will be able to talk to these girls in their language and agree that they will not kill him. Of course, they were all simply shocked when he began to speak their language and began to look at him strangely, but this did not make it any easier for him. The next chapter begins with the fact that a girl with black eyes and red hair saw a danger in him and decided to finish him off as quickly as possible. She simply couldn't understand why the hell some foreigner had learned to speak the language of their island. The girl tells him that there was only one foreigner who could know their language, and he lived 15 years ago. On the verge of death, the main character still decided not to get confused and talks about the fact that this man was his uncle. His uncle constantly talked about this mysterious island and taught him this unknown language as a child. Suddenly, a lady with black hair decided to intervene in the conversation because the boy really looked like the foreigner who had been on their island earlier. The blonde could not believe her, but that stranger lived at her house and therefore she managed to remember his face exactly. Since the boy's identity was confirmed by her friends, instead of stabbing him, she cuts the ropes that were on his hands. Still, the lady with red hair says that it's not worth killing the guy if he really is that man's nephew. It would be disrespectful to him, since he did too much good for their island. She thought that they had some kind of strange family because first his uncle, and now he could find them. And our main character was glad that at least he was alive. But now he needed to get out of here, and he decides to ask these girls if they know what happened to his ship, but they didn't see anything like it. It turns out that the lady with black hair brought him here straight from the beach. After his ship collapsed, he was left lying on the sand. Realizing that now he has no way to get out, the boy falls into despair. Noticing this, the girl with red hair decides to propose to him. If suddenly the main character can do what she says, then she will give him a new ship. The main character was simply shocked and asked what she needed from him. But there was nothing special about this. It was just that their population was gradually approaching zero, and the main character had to help fix it. Of course, he was simply shocked by such a request, but there was nowhere to go. He would have to build an orphanage here or find another way to correct their situation. But they have clearly already figured out a way to help them, and decide to play basketball with the main character. Everyone took turns taking the ball into their hands and trying to score it into the baskets, of course. Everyone tried to play as best as possible. It was immediately clear that the main character did not really like playing basketball against such a huge team, but he had no other choice. He had to defeat them all in order to get off the island as quickly as possible. Still, she fails to do this and he simply loses consciousness, and when he wakes up the next day, he tries to remember what the hell happened yesterday. Having realized everything that happened yesterday, he says to hell with his childhood dream and is now going to stay on this island. That day, the boy's health deteriorated sharply, and he simply lost consciousness. The girls didn't even know what to do with him now. After that, they brought him to this house, and from that very moment, the main character decided that he would forever remain on this island, surrounded by beautiful ladies. Having decided to walk a little, the main character realizes that everything hurts terribly and he needs to get himself in order. After looking around, he realized that at the moment he would not be able to leave the island so easily, even if he had a ship. This was all because of the strong waves that formed due to the stones around the island. The girls told him that the waves subside only once a year. The boy was terribly lucky that he managed to survive such a terrible storm. In any case, he simply has no other choice, so he will remain on this island for 1 year, and therefore will already figure out a way to return back. Suddenly, one of the girls appears behind him and asks him not to worry so much because one day the moment will definitely come when he will be able to get out of here. This girl's name is Mia, and she was worried about the main character, but he asked her not to think about it because it was only his problem. If you think about it, then the girl was the one who found him, saved him, and dragged him to the island, but the boy didn't even have time to say thank you to her. But she asks him not to do this because she simply could not leave the main character to his fate. Since it was she who saved his life, it was decided at the council of the girls that she should give him a tour of the island and answer all his various questions. She was also chosen for a special mission to increase their population. Suddenly, a rabbit appeared from the bushes and greatly frightened the girl, causing her to fall to the ground. Of course, the main character was very worried about her and asked if Mia was okay. But it's not clear why she just starts crying and constantly repeating for someone to save her. It was very strange because it was an ordinary rabbit that had already run away. He tries to calm her down as soon as possible, saying that the rabbit is no longer there. But she strangely began to call a man nicknamed Mr. Wave. After some time, they finally show us a boy and a lady who was still able to calm down. She thought that the main character would consider her pathetic because she was afraid of an ordinary rabbit, although he denied it. But the girl immediately asked not to pretend to be him because she herself knows that she is terribly pathetic. She tells him the reason why the girl with red hair offered him a deal. A few years ago, a terrible disease appeared on the island due to which there were only 14 people left. Everyone should try hard and be responsible, but Mia did not consider herself special and thought which only brings harm to his partners. But the main character tried to calm her down by saying that if suddenly she could leave the island with him, then she could easily become a real model for some clothing brand. He says that everything she said about herself is not true, because the girl is just an incredibly strong person who definitely brings benefits to her team. The main character clearly remembered how she tried to save him after the current of the sea carried him away, and he simply lay on the seashore with his lungs full of water. And when the boy had a terrible fever after playing basketball against the whole team, the girl did not leave his side all the time and tried to make sure that he recovered as quickly as possible. He sees perfectly well that the girl is incredibly kind and brave, and the main character is sure that others also see these qualities perfectly well. But Mia was simply shocked that someone was saying such kind words to her. It would seem that the very romantic moment had just arrived when the main character would have his first kiss, but of course this does not happen because she simply pushes him away from her. He can't understand why she pushed him away, but she had to do 2 things for him today. The first was to give him a tour of the island and then take him back to the village. And the second was that she had to play basketball with him and make sure that the population of their island became the same again. After which she asks to start the first round of basketball, and so that they can finally find out which of them is a truly strong player. But when Mr. Wave decided not to give in to the lady and show what he was capable of, Mia didn't like the fact that he played so well and asked to wait a little. In fact, he was not going to give up so easily, but only asked that they go to a special basketball court, because playing outdoors was not the best idea. The main character couldn't understand such a strange request, but it turns out that he just doesn't want anyone to see how badly she plays. The boy thought it was very cute and agreed to her request, after which the actions are transferred to the basketball court, where their game of basketball took a decisive turn because no one was going to lose. It turns out that, unlike her friends, she had never played basketball until that moment, but only watched others play, so she did not know how to play. But it turns out that she didn't play as bad as she thought, after all. She spent a very long time looking at how others played, and therefore had rough ideas about how to play basketball. Finally, the very moment came when she had to score her first ball into the basketball basket, after which she takes the ball from the main character and tries to score the first goal. Of course, it was incredibly exciting, and therefore immediately after the ball ends up in the basket, she begins to cry. At first, the boy doesn't understand why she's crying, but realizing that she's proud of herself, he tries to calm her down, saying that she's a real good guy. Since she was able to figure out the game, our boy decides to start playing more seriously like a character from the anime Kuroko's Basketball. His movements on the field become incredibly fast, and she can no longer keep up with him. Still, at one moment he realizes that the girl was still a beginner who is playing basketball for the first time in her life and asks if everything is okay with her. But she just puts on the face of a real Sigma and says that at first she was terribly scared because the main character plays basketball much better than her. But now she is not going to just stand and cry and decides to start fighting for her victory. After what has been said, the lady also decides not to restrain her strength and plays seriously. Now the boy has to try to play with her on an equal footing because she turns out to be an incredibly fast opponent. Their score was equal, but still there was too little time left until the end of the round. The main character decides to warn her about this, and now the game started in a matter of seconds. After which he still manages to intercept the ball, and in a few seconds he scores a goal in the basket and wins the game. She turned out to be a worthy opponent, but she was still incredibly tired, so she will have to postpone the tour of the island for another day. At night, we see a man standing in front of the main character's house and carefully watching him. In a few seconds, he finds himself next to the boy and is about to finish him off with a kitchen knife. The main character was very ill, and Mia again had to sit next to him to take care of his condition. All the same, the girls agreed that the boy would live with them on the island for 1 year, and in return he promised that he would perform various tasks that they would ask him to do. After which we see that Mia shows him the border of the village, which he cannot go beyond alone, because there are many wild animals there that he cannot cope with. The lady is going to accompany the main character to the village, but he refuses the offer, saying that she is already very tired after playing basketball for such a long time. Although she was worried that the main character might get lost, but he said that he remembered the way well, after which the boy decides to activate the flash speed and runs away from her at incredibly high speed, leaving the lady completely unaware of why he ran away from her so suddenly. As generally expected, our boy still got lost in this damned forest, and where the hell is he now? There were only trees around, and now he could only pray in the hope that he would not die just because he remembered the road incorrectly. The boy decides to continue his journey until he finds some kind of pond. From there, he can already find his way, but he doesn't even notice how there is a trap left by the local residents under his feet. At first, he can't understand what the hell just happened, but after looking at himself, the main character realizes that he is completely covered with strange needles. Now the samurai sword was damaged, and he couldn't understand who he could do something to get such terrible revenge on him because it was his beloved sword. Having lost consciousness, the boy wakes up in some cave and sees one of the girls who repaired the samurai's sword. The main character tried to understand what kind of nonsense was going on here, but the girl with black hair didn't say anything in response. But still, she decided to fix the sword that was broken so he couldn't be angry with her. Still, he understands that those needles were released by her, and then he begins to worry about what she is going to do next. While he was trying to understand her insidious plan, he realized that after the needles were released, nothing hurt him. On the contrary, he felt as usual. And suddenly, he decides to ask her. He remembered very well that this lady was at that meeting when he was first brought to this island. After which he asks if she helped him get out of that terrible trap with needles. But the girl with black hair asks him not to thank her because she personally put that trap in his way. It turns out that she is hunting wild animals, and the main character accidentally fell into her trap. The needles contained sleeping pills and a strong poison that paralyzes all possible actions of animals. As we found out, it also works great on humans. Suddenly, the main character says that he was not going to thank the girl. On the contrary, he is going to make her his opponent for playing basketball. Suddenly, the guy activates some strange power, and the girl doesn't understand what's happening to him. Is the main character really capable of using such an unreal power? Those needles specifically contained a substance that controls animals so that they are not so wild. but only for the main character the effect of the medicine passed faster, and now he received some kind of non-human abilities. This was indeed the case. Now our boy looked more like an animal driven into a corner than a man, which is why he played basketball much more aggressively than usual. At the moment the boy is spending too much energy, he just scored the ball in the basket and spent a lot of energy, so she is going to take advantage of the moment while he is weak and neutralize him. But the main character didn't look at all like the person who was very tired. It turns out that there was another medicine in the needles, and now not only was he terribly strong, but he also didn't feel tired. Those medicines were intended for large animals that could not be easily caught, but the boy resembled a wild bull that would soon begin to destroy everything that stood in his way. If she leaves the boy in this state, then his body may not withstand such a load and he will simply go to the next world, so she decides that it would be better to first inject him with a sleeping pill and then an antidote. But suddenly something terrible happens. The girl simply fell to the ground because she tripped over a stone. Now she had no chance to defeat such a strong opponent. After which the main character, like a real Kratos who does not respect women, decides to strike a strong blow before continuing their game of basketball. It turns out that that poison also entered her body, but she did not receive any superpowers. On the contrary, now she was weaker than usual and had no chance of winning against this monster. This lady's name is Uma. She was one of the survivors on the island and led a group of hunters who were engaged in getting food. Umi the art of fighting against wild animals from an early age. By the age of 10, she had acquired excellent skills and joined the main team of hunters, but all this was completely unimportant because now she was terribly weak and could not even play basketball against the main character. First of all, she was going to leave the basketball court as soon as possible, but the main character is not going to let her go so easily because their match is still not over. After which the boy performs his strongest move, with which he simply knocks the opponent down and begins to run towards the basket to score a goal. From that moment on, she began to understand that she simply had no chance against a basketball monster like him. Now the boy was no longer a man, but some kind of animal who could only throw the ball into the basket. Just look at his facial expression. It looks like Hanma's Yujiro, when he fights against truly strong opponents, is simply a real destruction machine. After many such blows, the lady simply could not stand on her feet. The main character was too strong, and when he took the ball from her, there was not even one chance to change the outcome of the battle. Even after such a series of attacks, he still ran around the field like crazy, trying to score as many goals as possible. But it seemed that his strength was gradually running out. This indeed turns out to be so. The eyes of the main character were no longer so crazy, and he still comes to a human state. He begins to feel dizzy, and he cannot understand what just happened to him. The boy did not even remember what he did while he was in this mode. Having looked around carefully, he sees a girl who was exhausted and understands that something terrible has happened. He immediately runs to her aid and tries to bring her to consciousness. All this time, she had terrible nightmares about how she played basketball, but she still managed to wake up, and basketball no longer bothered her. The main character was also glad that she woke up. He thought that she had gone to her grandmother in the next world. He did not know the place where she lived, so he decided to bring her to his home. Umi decided to bow to the main character to say thank you for helping her, but he asked her not to strain too much because she had only recently regained consciousness and her condition was far from the best. But instead of words of gratitude, she simply heads towards the exit without saying a word, leaving the boy standing in confusion of what is happening. The girl simply goes out into the street and tries to leave this place as quickly as possible, but in fact, she only had thoughts in her head that the main character could turn into that terrible monster again, and they would start playing damn basketball again. After which the action moves to the lady with red hair, who couldn't believe that he played basketball with only 2 people. The boy tried to come up with an excuse, but she continues to scold him, saying that 10 whole days have passed since he ended up on the island. The main character simply says that his basketball skills deteriorated terribly after he got to the island and he needed time to get used to the new place. She said that everything is fine, but he will have to play many more games of basketball after he gets used to it to life on the island. In the next frame, we are shown a boy who was returning to his house and was very dissatisfied with his situation. Why is the lady with red hair so unhappy with him? Because he can't just play basketball with every person he meets on this island. When suddenly someone shouted to him so that the guy would be more careful. For some reason, a chicken flies right into his face as if someone decided to play Angry Birds in real life. But the main character didn't find this joke very funny. While he was trying to understand why the hell someone was throwing animals around, some girl was running in the background and asking the boy to quickly catch the chicken that had run away from her. Realizing that it was an incredibly beautiful girl, he immediately begins to run after the chicken at the speed of Sonic the Hedgehog. After some time, our boy was already lying on the ground and holding that same chicken in his hands. Now he knew the fact that chickens are incredibly fast birds. While he was trying to catch his breath, someone came up to him and said thank you for catching the chicken. It was clear that he was very tired, so they offered him a glass of water. The lady also offered him milk from the farm, but it just seems that the main character is allergic to lactose and he doesn't understand whether he can survive after drinking it. The lady with pink hair turns out to be very kind. She says that her name is Poo-Poo, and she works at this ranch in honor of the fact that the boy helped her. She was going to give him a lot of milk from their farm, after which she decides to show him the cows that produce this milk, but it seems that Mr. Wave has completely stopped wanting to drink. Still, the main character helped her, so she is going to give him the freshest product that is available on their farm. Despite the fact that the boy didn't really like the products produced on the farm, he still agreed to try it and did not regret it, because it was the most delicious milk he had ever drunk in his life. Suddenly, the main character realizes that it was rude of him to stay away, so he decides to invite the girl to lunch, let her bring milk, and Mr. Wave will cook the food. She clearly likes this offer, and at that very second they begin to set the table so that they can quickly taste the delicious food. But suddenly she discovers a pack of milk in his refrigerator and cannot believe that the main character can drink something containing chemicals, because it was simply terrible. Why would he need it when he has a real farm on his island? But the main character only puts on the face of a real Sigma and tells the girl that he made a huge mistake, that all this time he was drinking milk from the store. From the moment she tried milk from their farm, his life completely changed. The lady was simply shocked by this statement and does not understand such a strange reaction, but still he decides that it would be a great idea to play basketball with this lady as a sign of gratitude for such delicious milk from their cow farm. But like other girls from this island, she turns out to be very weak and simply cannot compete with such a strong opponent. But the main character asks her to try the milk that he buys in the store, because it is also very tasty. No matter how strange it was, now the opinions of both have completely changed because now the main character liked milk from the farm, and the girl liked milk that was bought in the store. After which their game of basketball continued, and now, after they had eaten and drank a lot of milk, they were both incredibly strong. The main character was even surprised that she began to play on par with him. Every time a girl took the ball away from him, incredible strength was felt. So my advice to you children is to drink more milk so that you can also play just like this lady. But the main character also became stronger after he ate, so he decides to show who really was the boss of the rocking chair and plays at full capacity. Suddenly her facial expression becomes truly crazy, which scares the main character. She asks Mr. Wave if he likes to play basketball with her. Poo-Poo decides to use a new tactic, with which he will definitely be able to defeat the main character. Suddenly she becomes incredibly fast to the point that the boy simply cannot keep up with her. It was simply impossible to believe, but in a few seconds she finds herself in front of the basket and throws the ball there. The main character was simply shocked by this turn of events, because she turned out to be a much more worthy opponent than he could have thought. Now he too was not going to play as a joke, and would show her all his abilities. The speed that the girl had was a simple joke because, having activated his powers, he simply destroys the playing field. At the same second, he finds himself in front of the ring and throws the ball. But he completely forgot that up to this moment, he had already played many games of basketball, so his back still lets him down. Despite the fact that he could no longer move, Mr. Wave was able to win this round, and leaving the lady standing in shock, the second round will begin soon. Poo-Poo could not believe that even after she activated her powers, she could not defeat the main character. But she was still not going to despair, saying that she would definitely try in the second round. The beginning of the second round had just arrived. Since the main character injured his back, she seemed to have a chance to win. But she herself was also not in the best condition, so only the end of the round could determine the winner. As soon as the second round began, Poo-Poo tried to activate her speed powers, but they were not as strong as before because she spent a lot of energy in the first round of basketball. She still tried to take the ball away from the boy, and she managed to do it because every time he tried to reach for the ball, his back immediately began to hurt. Mr. Wave understood perfectly well that if he continued to play at this pace, he simply would not be able to defeat her, in which case he decided to use all his strength, even if this would be his last game. It didn't matter to him at all that he didn't have the strength. He made an agreement to go through his own limits, and in such cases, he could return to the game as a completely different person. The second round is also gradually coming to an end. All this time the girl played like a real pro, but only after activating her true power, the main character takes the lead and scores a lot of points in just a few seconds, thereby taking the lead. After their victory, they still remained friends, and the main character decides to ask where this lady got such a huge amount of milk on the farm, and why it is needed because not many people live on the island. The lady immediately began to tell the story that her parents kept a farm even before the terrible tragedy on the island, after which she inherited the farm. But what happened next, you will find out in the next part. Thanks for watching. Like it, so that the next part comes out as soon as possible quicker.